This encounter happened years ago, when I was around 8 years old and in another town, staying at a hotel with my sister Gabby, my parents, and my sister's soccer team for a nearby tournament. The team had finished up with their games for the day, and since I was close in age to my sister and her team, we were playing in the hotel's pool. My sister, cousin, who was on the same soccer team, and I decided to go sit in the sauna, still in our bathing suits. There was an older man in there, but we didn't think anything of it. We were trying to refill the sauna water with pool water, and he told us not to use the chlorinated water and to let him do it. He seemed friendly, and I remember chatting with him, telling him our names and talking about soccer. Nothing weird at all happened in the sauna, and I didn't think anything more of it. A few hours later, my sister, parents, and I were getting ready to go to bed when the hotel phone rang. It was the man from the sauna trying to chat up my sister. He kept asking,
"Hi Gabby, where are you? I want to see you again."
And other stuff like that. Naturally, my parents freaked the hell out, because somehow this man followed us to our room in order to figure out the room's number. Apparently he called other rooms of the girls on the soccer team too. My sister and I were moved to sleep in my cousin's room for the night, and I remember looking into the hotel lobby and seeing a bunch of police officers responding. I never heard anything again about what happened that night. My parents never brought it up again. Not even the next morning when we left the hotel. When I was younger, about 9, my mom would take me out on holiday to the coastline every year. I absolutely despised it. I was forced to go despite my kicking and screaming. I would get homesick as soon as I left the safety of my room. We'd always go to this lower middle class accommodation with a crappy service from the holiday agency. Maybe I just have high standards, but it doesn't end there. My mom would drag me around the holiday town, around every shop, be it clothes, porcelain, books, literally anything. In short, it didn't feel like much of a holiday to me. In my despair after a long day under the roaring sun, she found yet another clothes shop. My feet were absolutely killing me. I couldn't stand the pain any longer, so I found myself a spot in the shade behind a wide concrete pillar. I sat myself down and sighed in relief. After only a few moments, I caught another person heading my way in the corner of my eye. When they got closer, I could make out it was a woman, wearing denim trousers and a denim jacket, with a camera in her hand. My mother was distracted looking at dresses. The woman crouched down right next to me. At this point, my reflexes were kicking in. I felt the adrenaline race through my veins. Then I felt her cold hand touch my shoulder. Literally every possible alarm bell was ringing inside of me at this point. It was like I went into automatic pilot as I jolted up and ran back to my mom as fast as you could say stranger danger. As I reached the side of my mom, I stopped and froze. I was breathing heavily and wheezing like a dying dog. My mother seemed to be completely oblivious to what had just happened. She just said, "What do you think of the dress?" When I looked behind me to see if I could find the woman I had just briefly encountered, I couldn't see her in the crowd of tourists that were out shopping. A woman in denim certainly would have stood out to me. This made it even more suspicious since, if it was just a helpful stranger wondering if I'm lost, she would have stayed to make sure I'm alright, instead of disappearing into thin air. And why would you touch a strange child you never seen before and invade their personal space when all it takes is a, "Hey, are you alright?" to get my attention? I never told my mom what happened, but I never stopped worrying for the children that were in the area that day. I'm 40 years old now, so this actually occurred about 27 years ago. I had gone to the mall with my mother, and being the cool and independent little shit that I was, I didn't want to walk around with my mom. I was about 13, 14 years old, so my mom agreed to let me wander the mall and meet at a department store in 1 hour. Usually I would go window shopping or go into Spencer's Gifts to look at all the dorky stuff that teenagers liked back in the day. When the hour came up, I walked into the agreed-upon meeting spot, the department store, to wait for my mom. I must have been in there for not 3 minutes when an older man came up to me and attempted to strike up a conversation. My parents had always warned my brother and me about stranger danger situations and whatnot. However, the man seemed harmless at the time. He started telling me that I was a beautiful young lady. Warning bells started going off in my head. He then tried to convince me to go with him to his car because he supposedly had a camera there, and all he wanted to do was take a quick picture of me to submit to an agency. This whole time I began to feel like I was having an out-of-body experience. All I kept doing was giggling nervously and telling him no. He became a bit more adamant about getting me to follow him, to the point he started nudging my arm and pulling me so I could go outside and take this picture. Finally, as quick as this bizarre event began, it ended. An older lady, who, now that I think about it, was probably about my age, in her 40s, came up to us and asked him, "Do you know this girl?" The man became visibly uncomfortable and the lady stood by my side and told him to F off. He quickly shuffled away and she looked me square in the eyes and asked me if I was okay. In hindsight, I really don't think I knew what could have happened if I followed this creepster to his vehicle. All I did was tell the lady, God bless her heart and soul, that I was fine as I walked away to finally find my mother. Looking back, I'm so grateful for that lady. I'm not one to act like a drama queen or even a person who overreacts to certain situations. However, I believe that this woman may have saved my life. I will never, in my life, forget her or that experience. When I was a kid, 8 at the most, I was playing outside on my street. I didn't know the area well because this is where I lived with my mom when my parents split up. I barely knew any of the neighbors, but I knew a lot of kids played on the far end of the road, so it seemed safe enough. Well, on this day, I was playing on a scooter when I fell over coming down a hill. Grazed my hands and knees, nothing too bad though. As I got up, I remember turning around and there was a man standing behind me, probably late 60s or 70s. He asked if I was okay, and I said I was, but he seemed concerned. He told me that I should come back to his house and get my hands and knees cleaned up. I told him it was okay. I live right over there, I said and pointed. It was literally a minute or two walking distance. However, he insisted I go with him, said his house was closer. He grabbed the scooter and we started walking away from my house towards his. By this stage I knew I could be in danger. Alarm bells were ringing in my head, but he kept insisting we go back to his house. While we walked, him holding the scooter and not letting me push it, I started to drop back a bit while he was talking. Kept asking me questions, but I don't remember what exactly. When he wasn't looking, I quickly turned and ran back to my house, my heart beating 1,000,000 times a minute. I never saw him or the scooter again. Didn't hear of anyone going missing or anything either. I've since learned he tried this kind of thing with loads of kids in the area and is pretty well known for it. As far as I know, he never succeeded. Luckily, we were all taught in school about stranger danger. I'm sure my mom didn't believe me until years later. Pretty scary thinking back on it. So this happened to my brother about 10 years ago. He was around 8 at the time, myself about 13. A friend of mine and her mother invited my mother and I to the movies with them over the March break. My brother, being too young to be left at home, was forced to come along. We went just after lunch, so by the time the movie was out, the theater was just starting the evening rush. My friend, her mother, and I went to use the washroom before going home, and my brother had to go as well. Until then, he had accompanied my mother to the women's washroom, but I guess he thought he was too old for this now and wanted to go into the men's by himself. My overly protective mother was not having this, so she opted for the single-room family washroom, where there was a middle-aged man waiting by the door. After a few moments, he told my mother that his young daughter, about the same age as my brother, was inside, and he offered to take my brother to the men's so they wouldn't need to wait. Of course, my mother was a little freaked out and declined this offer. The man waited a bit longer, offered again, and when he was rejected a second time, just walked away. By this time, my friend and I had returned from the washroom, so my mom knocked on the family washroom door, with no response. She tried the door, which was unlocked, and found the washroom to be empty. It terrifies me to think of what could have happened to him, had my mother been less paranoid.